Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome everyone to our wonderful Beyond College webinar today. Bid you greetings here from the Queen City of Charlotte, North Carolina. And we're just really appreciative of everyone joining us here for today's wonderful discussion, all about defining and building a strong leadership brand. So thank you so much for being with us today. I know we have scholars joining from all over the globe, actually. And again, I'm very privileged. My name is Dewey Norwood, very fortunate to work in our external engagement group and as a part of our diverse segments, representation, and inclusion. And so really excited to be on with you all for today and happy to be one of the hosts associated with this wonderful programming. And so certainly look forward to continuing conversations with each of you all in the days ahead. On the next slide, we're going to run through the agenda. And as I always love to say, we're going to get to the real stars of the show with things. So the next slide will actually give you, we always love to share some kind of fun news. And so this is a story that's one that's pretty significant for our institution. And the headline reads, Wells Fargo invests in 6 Black-owned banks. This is a press release from earlier this month spotlighting our firm's pledge to invest up to $50 million in Black-owned banks. And you'll see them wonderful banks listed here. So Broadway Federal Bank and Carver Federal Savings Bank, Citizens Savings Bank, Commonwealth National Bank, of course, in Mobile, Alabama, M&F Bank, and then also Optus Bank. And so would encourage everyone to take a closer look at this. And this is one of the stories that certainly during Black History Month, we wanted to spotlight and celebrate these wonderful strategic investments that our firm is making in these wonderful institutions. And so visit our newsroom and you'll be able to learn a few more details there. All right, as we transition now, let's get to the items. This is webinar number 2 of 12. So many of you were with us last month for our discussion around the graduate school process. And I just want to give a huge thank you and a huge shout out to our partners at APIA Scholars. They actually are going to be hosting all of this year's programming. And so APIA Scholars team, thank you so much for wanting to be involved here. And you can actually check out the playback of last month's webinar via their YouTube channel. We also have a Wells Fargo YouTube channel where you'll be able to find the full library of this year's presentations as well. Certainly want to give a huge shout out here now from our by the numbers perspective. Scholars, you've done it again. We have 375 RSVPs for today's programming. So thank you all so much for joining. Always love to talk about our partners that are supporting the work that's going on. Huge shout out to UNO, as they call it, also called the University of Nebraska at Omaha. You all have absolutely set the market here with referring the most number of students for this time around. So certainly want to celebrate you. And also special thanks to all of our Wells Fargo colleagues that are referring students to these wonderful webinars. We hope that the information is valuable and beneficial. Also want to give a shout out to Fisk University. Fisk, you guys are right there also at the top, one of our wonderful HBCUs with high referral numbers. Bowie State was also right in the mix again here for the month of February. So congratulations. So let's get into it, team. What are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about definitions and concepts that you need to be thinking about relative to your brand. We're going to touch on those 5 Ds of your leadership brand. And we're also going to talk about turning your personal brand into a leadership brand. Again, we've got leaders that are going to be sharing, I think, some really great information with you that's going to be spot on as you're continuing to build your brand in the days ahead. We get to the end of the call, we'll give you some reminders about how to access the playback. Of course, we'll talk about some of the future webinars that are coming up. And then always get social with us. Use that hashtag WFC Beyond College. Again, WFC Beyond College is the way to stay connected with us around things. So with that said, we're going to give you some reminders around how you can submit questions. We've got our wonderful partner, Katrina, working in the background today, helping us out with lots of things. So if you would like to submit questions to us confidentially throughout today's presentation, please utilize either the Q&A feature that's here within the Zoom, or if you need to submit those things confidentially, simply send an email over to Katrina. She's actually going to be monitoring the Q&A queue with things for us. And please remember, scholars, we're never going to read your name. We're never going to say who the question came from, but we'll always know that if it's a question that's top of mind for you, it's probably a question that's going to be top of mind for some of our other partners as well. All right, with that said, we're going to shift and transition over to our partner introductions. And happy to have back for the second year in a row, our wonderful partner, Shalane Colbert, within our Wells Fargo Asset Management team, and also Sarah Ostendorf from our Wells Fargo Diverse and Consumer Segments Marketing team. So these are exceptional leaders with, I won't say how many exact years of experience in the corporate space, because I get in trouble when I give numbers, but they have a great deal of experience in the corporate space and are really just doing amazing work. So Shalane, we're elated to have you back on with us. Sarah, such an honor to be back on with you for this wonderful discussion here during Black History Month. So thank you all so much. I want to turn the reins over to you all for any opening comments that you may have and some of the other great elements for today. So Shalane, Sarah, welcome aboard, and we'll give you all the reins from here.
Thank you so much, Dewey, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to everyone that has joined the webinar. I know if you don't know Dewey, he's one of the best dressed people in Wells Fargo, and he did not disappoint again today.
Got the dashiki on here for Black History Month. So compliments to my wife. My wife's favorite color is red. So.
I love it. That's also my favorite color. So
there you go.
But I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to discuss the topic of building and defining your leadership brand with Sarah. My name is Shalane Colbert. As Dewey mentioned, I'm also based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm a business support manager with Wells Fargo Asset Management, which is a business within our wealth and investment management division. I've had the pleasure of working for Wells Fargo for the last 8 years, and in my current role, I help my business to execute initiatives around HR processes, diversity and inclusion, and recruiting, hiring, training, and developing our early talent. I manage the analysts in our analyst development program, and I also manage the interns that support our business. Now I'm going to turn over to Sarah.
Thanks, Shalane. Dewey, thank you for the introduction as well. This is Sarah Ostendorf. I hail from the Twin Cities out of the Minneapolis area. And I am in the diverse and consumer segment marketing space, where I am the SVP and head of the student segment marketing group. And so as a part of that group, what we do is deliver continuity campaigns and integrated marketing campaigns specifically to the student segment, kind of at a upper funnel brand level. So really trying to connect with you folks and understand your needs and your sentiments and your concerns and desires in the marketplace, and trying to really connect with you and help with things like financial guidance and other kinds of content that help students get through the journey of college successfully. So really pleased to be here. Thank you for having us, and thank you for joining to go on this journey of this topic with us.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Now we're going to have a little fun. We want this to be interactive, so we're going to launch a polling question. And so I'll read the question as the polling question launches. According to Kantar's Brand Z Top 100 Most Valuable U.S. Brands for 2020, what do you think is the #1 most trusted brand? And we'll give you a little bit of time to make your selection. We have Apple on the list, Amazon, McDonald's, Verizon, and Wells Fargo.
So safe to say, team, that we're familiar with all of those brands. Very well-known names here. So let's see.
All right, the responses are coming in. Right now, it looks like Amazon's in the lead with 39%. I'm glad a lot of people have Wells Fargo as their choice. Got 24% with Wells Fargo. So I'll go ahead and tell you the correct answer is Amazon. Amazon is actually #1, but I'm also very happy to report Wells Fargo is number 25 on the Brand Z list. And so to tell you a little bit more about this, Millward Brown's brand valuation analysis provides strong evidence of the importance of branding for business leaders. Brand is about reputation. A brand generates trust for a company, for its products, and for its services. The brands mentioned in the Brand Z Top 100 list are the world's most trusted brands. As we said, Amazon's #1. We all know companies have brands and those brands have value. But did you know that people have brands too? Some are clearly communicated and have actual value. Others are murky and not as easy to attach a value. But as you'll see on your screen, there's some names that are loading on the screen. Let's see, we got Tom Brady, Kamala Harris is on there, Selena Gomez, Tommy Orange, Meghan Markle. I'm sure you can all think of.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Shalane, I have to chime in here. I'm seeing lots of names that I'm very, very familiar with across industry, across entertainment. And then one name jumps out to me here. I see Henry Aaron's name here on this list. Obviously, a great career player in the Negro Leagues and then ultimately matriculating to Major League Baseball and then breaking the home run record. So, and I know that Mr. Aaron recently passed away. So it sounds like your brand can even be extended, again, candidly past your time here, even on the planet in some way, shape, or form. So, wow, what a great list. What a great list.
Right, definitely. Yeah, your brand can also be your legacy.
Wow.
And so I want you to think about, your name, your personal brand. If your name was on the list, what words would come to mind for people who know you or have interacted with you? And so now on this slide, we'll go over a couple of key definitions and concepts. And we'll be happy to let you know you can influence what people think of you and how they see you. So always remember that. And so on this slide, personal branding is the practice of people marketing themselves and their careers as brands. It is the intentional effort to create and influence public perception of an individual. Effective personal branding can position a person in a place of authority and have others view you as an expert. It can market your services, establish or elevate your credibility, develop trust and loyalty within your network or with your clients and customers, and differentiate you from competitors. Now, leadership brand conveys your identity and distinctiveness as a leader. Your leadership brand is created by the way you behave, react, and interact. It is linked to your effectiveness as a leader. Your brand reflects your priorities and the values that you stand for. Now, where these two concepts intersect is your leadership brand is how your personal brand plays out in the process of displaying leadership. It's how you work with others to produce results. You can move on to the next slide. All right, on the previous slide, we discussed the definitions of personal and leadership branding. Now we have another polling question. Let's find out how many of you actually have an established personal or leadership brand. So the question is, answer as if, I have intentionally built a personal leadership brand for myself. Your options are, I've built one and it works well for me. I've been thinking about one and wrote down a couple of thoughts. I've heard about personal brands. I'm a little intrigued. Or nope, I haven't started on the personal brand journey just yet. So we'll give you a few more seconds to make your selection. And then we'll see where the majority, where you fall. All right, okay.
Wow, some interesting metrics there, Shalane. Interesting numbers.
It is, it's almost a three-way tie. But slightly, most people have heard about a personal brand and they're a little intrigued. So don't worry if you're in the minority and you've already built one and it works well for you. That's wonderful and great. But sounds like a lot of us have some work to do. And so you're in the right place. And hopefully the tips that Sarah and I share with you today will help you on building your own personal brand. And so, according to some research, it seems that very few people have actually taken the formal action in building and managing their personal brand. Less than 15% have truly defined their personal brands, and fewer than 5% are consistently personalizing and growing their brand. We believe that if people knew the power that comes along with a strong brand, the numbers would surely grow. Just think about it. A top selling product cannot get there without a powerful brand. The same is true for people. And on the current slide, I'm going to turn over to Sarah, and she's going to walk us through and give us more details about personal and leadership branding.
Yeah, thanks, Shalane. And hi, everybody. I'm actually super impressed with the 5% or 7% that have one and it's working for them, because I think a personal brand and a leadership brand is not an easy thing to come by necessarily, and it takes some real effort to take the time to do it. So congratulations to those folks. And for all of us, it's actually a journey that never really ends, right? We're constantly evolving, and our brands probably evolve with us. But Shalane walked you through kind of the definition of a personal brand and a leadership brand. And in order to develop that leadership brand, you really need to start with your personal brand. And then we can overlay the effectiveness of leading others to develop that leadership brand. So we're going to spend the majority of the next bit talking about your personal brand. And then at the end, we'll kind of overlay that leadership brand to bring it to that place. Developing a personal brand really does take some time to reflect and to reach out to others. So it's not something that we're actually going to just complete in the next 20 minutes or 30 minutes here. But what we're striving to do is to give you something really tangible in terms of steps you can take to develop your personal brand. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 3 key steps to the personal brand, and you can see those on the slide. First is discover. What do you need to know about yourself? How do others see you? What do you want your personal brand to say? This is all a part of that discover process. Then you can go into, after you kind of have that fact base of what you've thought about for yourself and what other people have said, then you can go into this defined phase. And what define is about taking all of that information and really distilling it down into something crisp and impactful and meaningful. And that takes a lot of work, as you know, right? That editing process can be a real challenge. And that's where the secret sauce is to defining a personal brand. And then the third step is to do, right? It's the stage of action. This is where you make things happen. This is where you put your personal brand or leadership brand into practice. And it can be very helpful to think about, what are the things that I should be doing to put the brand into practice and into action. So with that, we can move to the next slide. There we go, thanks. In order to define your brand, it's critical that you take an assessment of yourself, both internally and externally, like it says on the slide. You need to do this from both the inside out and the outside in to get all of the perspectives. And in order to feel confident about what it is that you bring to the table, that's actually delivering on something valuable and that people actually perceive about you. So it's really important to do this activity both internally and externally. From an internal perspective, what you want to do is take some time to identify who you are, right? What words describe you? What do you think makes you unique? What are your passions? If you're thinking about what people might say about you, what would that be? And really take the time to write down, what are those 10 or 15 or 20 words that describe your brand? And in whatever context you want to use that, whether it's just generally in life or in school or projects or in work, it's fine. You can think across those. But as you're thinking of these words, really think across multiple dimensions. So you can be thinking about it in terms of competencies, like I might say, I'm a marketer, or I'm a coach, or I'm a speaker, or maybe you might say you're a creator or a researcher or a manager. So really those kind of competencies. Also think about things that might be called standards or how you kind of deliver. Maybe you're always learning. Maybe you think of yourself as creative or innovative or meticulous. Those are really good words as well. And then also think about your style. Are you direct? Are you casual? Are you generous? Are you confident? There's lots of different words, and it's really important to think about all of those dimensions as you're trying to write down and brainstorm that list of words that you think could represent you. So once you have that internal assessment of yourself written down, it's time to look outward because your brand is really about how other people perceive you. You have to learn where you are today. What is your reputation? How do people perceive you? What do they think about you? You know, what do people really think of you? This can be really exhilarating. It can be a really eye-opening. It could be maybe a humbling process. But really, typically, most people are pretty aware of what their weaknesses are, and it's their strengths that they haven't necessarily articulated. So you shouldn't really fear this process. It's actually much more empowering than it is humbling, and you're likely to really learn a lot about the strengths that other people see in you. So what you want to do, or this is a recommendation of what you could do, is you want to get what is a 360-degree view, asking other people what words they would use to describe you. Essentially the same thing you did internally, but now you're asking other people to do it. And you can go online and you can just get into Google and you can Google descriptive word list for a personal brand exercise, and you will see several of these come up. And so all you need to do is grab that. And what you need to do is identify, I'd say at least 13 people. If you can get 20 to 30 people, that's even better. And what you do is you just send this list to those folks and you say, hey, are you willing to take a quick assessment for me and let me know about when you perceive me or what you think about me? And here's a list of words, you know, which ones would you pick? What would you circle? And when I say 360, what I mean is you're reaching out again, kind of across dimensions of people that know you. Maybe you reach out to some teachers, coaches, peers, people you work with on group projects. Maybe you have folks that you work at a job with. You want to really get a full view, family, friends, all of them, include all of them. And so what you'll end up with is a really robust set of information from all of these sources about what people think of you. And what you want to do then is look across that set of information you've received and see where the patterns are. What are the words that people most often associated with you? So once you've discovered yourself, both from the inside and from the outside, and we can go ahead and move to the next slide, it's time to take what you've discovered and crystallize it to define your brand. So that brings us to define. And defining your brand is about narrowing in, like any kind of strategy work in general. The magic is in the choices you make. It's about bringing the uniqueness of you forward. That is what we're doing. That's the exercise. What is the takeaway you want people to say about you from their interactions with you? What is it you're going to say about yourself? This is your personal brand, right? It's not just words. It also has to be something you can back up. It has to be something you can demonstrate and live up to, right? I could say I'm an astronaut, but I really am not, and I haven't done any of those things. So we need to be authentic. And what happens is an effective brand really occurs at that intersection of your personal strengths and the impact that you're going to have on the lives of the people you interact with. Because really your brand needs to add value. So you need to be thinking about who is the primary audience for this and what is it that they need that I can meet that need, what I can do for them. And that's when you're really taking this idea and positioning your brand. You can have an ineffectual brand, but that's not what we're really striving for today, right? So what you can do is you take the reflections and words that you've gathered and you can form them into multiple things. And that's what you see up on the slide right now. So the first one we talk about is called a power statement. And what that is, 1 or 2 sentences that make a statement about your brand and give evidence to support it. So what we mean by evidence is you might highlight the particular accomplishment or skill or give an example. So you kind of reveal what your brand is and then demonstrate it through an example. And a power statement is something that might be very useful to use in an interview when the interviewer asks you to tell them about yourself. I don't know if any of you have been in that circumstance, but very often somebody will open with that, oh, tell me a little bit about yourself. Well, this might be something you want to start with. Or in an interview, somebody might ask you, why should I pick you over the other candidate? Again, a power statement might be an effective thing to go to. And if you're looking for inspiration for a power statement, this isn't the case across the board, but often you can go into LinkedIn and look in the About section, and people have kind of long power statements, but some of them are really good. And that might be a place where you can get some inspiration for how that might look. Another tool is the me in 30 seconds, or some people might call it the elevator speech. Essentially, it's just a little bit longer version of the power statement. So you have a little bit more time to give that brief personal introduction, talk about your brand. You have a little more time to talk about some specific accomplishments, and then, some character traits or skills that set you apart from others. So just a little bit longer to go into who you are and demonstrate how your brand has been brought to life over time. And then the last one is the brand promise. And this is kind of going the other direction as the me in 30 seconds, right? It's actually narrowing in even more specifically and really getting to what is the essence of your brand. And this is just super concise. And you can look to companies to really help with this one, right? Before I worked at Wells Fargo, I worked at Target. And the brand promise there is, now I forgot, expect more, pay less, right? And so very quickly, what you realize is what you're getting from Target is this idea of great value. So other examples of a brand promise kind of on a personal level might be, and I've seen people's over the years, and these are a few that have stuck out to me, as the insight to guide and the compassion to inspire, or smart ideas put into action, or do it right for the right reasons. So what you see is a really quick get on what's important to this person and why. And so I think that's really something distinctive and really a mantra that you can use for yourself if you're able to get to that. It's hard work to define your brand, but it definitely pays off in your ability to communicate about yourself and to live up to your own goals. And remember, like I said earlier, your brand can evolve. So what I want to kind of give a little bit of advice here is, don't let yourself get stuck on getting it right. Let yourself just go through the process and pick something, right? Because maybe it feels great right away, maybe it doesn't, but the more you kind of practice at it, the better it will get. And as you have more experiences and as you discover what it is important to you and what you prefer in terms of passions and interests, your brand can and should evolve over time as you figure that all out. So that kind of goes through define and some of the opportunities to bring brand to life. So we'll move to the next slide. Perfect. And now we're into do, right? This is the action. At this point, we've discovered a lot about ourselves, both from our internal perspective and asking others that we care about their opinions about to also tell us externally. And then we've done this define work to really crystallize and decide what our brand is. And now it's time to do the work to reflect our brand across all of our interaction points. And what's teed up on the slide here are 3 territories to bring your brand to life. The first one is kind of the basics, right? It's brand hygiene. So, go take a look and identify, are you using the photos online of yourself that you think makes sense in your work profiles or your LinkedIn, for instance? And is it reflecting the brand that you hope it is? And is it reflecting how you want to be perceived? So are you trying to be perceived as approachable or serious or kind or professional or casual or creative? All of those choices might suggest that you would have a different image or a different profile image. So I might have a great backyard barbecue photo on my LinkedIn profile. That might make a ton of sense if I am a travel and leisure content creator, or I love backyard barbecue cooking content. But it probably doesn't make a lot of sense if what I'm trying to convey is that I'm a financial advisor and I'm very professional. So the same photograph could absolutely work depending on what you're trying to convey and depending on if you're trying to be something else. So that's what I mean by hygiene, is take a look at those kind of things. And of course, go in and update your resume, your LinkedIn profile, etc. What you want to do is reflect the story about you that you want to pop off the page, right? There are so many dimensions, there's so many things you've done, and there's so many stories you can tell, but you don't want to bury the lead. You want to make sure that it's coming across. And the work you've done to define your brand will help you pick what things should really rise to the top. So that's the brand hygiene. The next territory is this idea of network in your brand territory. And you guys, this is a win-win scenario. This is a win-win territory, if you will. And let me get into explaining it. But what this is really about looking for opportunities to develop further into your brand, and doing that by participating in events or activities that connect you with what you want to be known for, right? So what happens is, by making those associations or connecting with those organizations, they create a brand halo for you. In other words, you'll derive some brand equity from others and from others' organizations. So let's take an example. If you want to be known as an innovator, or if you want to be known as an entrepreneur, then you should attend entrepreneur or innovation seminars or conferences or workshops, or you should be a part of an internal entrepreneur group. And if there isn't one, then you should probably start an innovation or entrepreneurship group or club. Or if you are working in an environment where that isn't necessarily true, but you are in a project group or what have you, then you want to always kind of bring innovative ideas or entrepreneurial ideas to the group, right? So maybe you can write articles about innovation. So basically, be at the places and say yes to the opportunities that will help you build your brand. And what's cool about it is, not only will people perceive you as being interested and good at, in this case, innovation or entrepreneurship, but you will actually be developing your own competency at the exact same time, because you're participating in and leaning into the topic. So it's a huge win-win, and I can't tell you how valuable this is and how quickly it works to drive your brand forward, especially amongst the people that you're associating with in those spaces. Okay, and so then the last one here is be your brand, this third territory. And this kind of rides along with what we were just talking about in the second one. But what I mean here is, in meetings or in group projects or in your individual work and interactions, you need to communicate and live up to your brand. If your brand in this case is to be a doer, maybe you dedicate yourself to asking about next steps at every meeting, or documenting what we're going to do next, or activating, setting up the next event, or whatever it might be. So at every interaction moment, you take a moment to build up your brand. And then that's how people will perceive you, right? So you're really living up and delivering on the value that you defined as your brand. And it goes back to the quote from Maya Angelou that we've heard over and over again, but it is so, so true. And this is living up to that. People will forget what you say, people will forget what you do, but they will never forget the way you make them feel. And that is absolutely true in the professional environment and in life in general. And that's part of living your brand. Okay, I think we can go to the next page. So, so we spent a lot of time talking about our personal brand, right? We discovered, we defined, we've now done some actions to clean up our hygiene and our networking and being our brand. Next, we're talking about, well, how do we turn a personal brand into a leadership brand? And a leadership brand is more externally focused. It's about leading a group or an organization to achieve results. So what you kind of need to do is think about, well, what does your organization need to accomplish over the next 1 to 3 to 5 years? And then you take your personal brand and you overlay that with what your organization needs to accomplish. How does the organization need to behave, and what can you do to help them get there? Things like, I can't tell, specific things can be like, do you need to be punctual, or do you need to be creative, or do you need to be flexible or caring, depending on the environment you're in? But there are all of those tools or all of those clubs in your golf bag, and you have to decide what fits with your personality, with your brand, as well as what is complementary to what that organization needs. So, and then lean into that and adjust that as needed and create confidence and trust in the organization. And what it does is really unleash the greatness of the folks you're working with, because they can really rely on you and trust in you and understand where you're coming from authentically. So that can seem kind of daunting, right? It's one thing to come up with your personal brand. It's another thing to now layer on what other people need from you in an organization. But how that might sound is, for me personally, when I've spent time thinking about what my leadership brand statement is, it leans on a few of what are my kind of strengths, key strengths, but then talks about how that drives action with others. So what I mean is, I might say, I deliver beyond the status quo. I do that through, this is kind of my personal brand part, strategic decisions, innovation, and through then the ability to activate. I amplify that by inspiring my teams to deliver quality work at speed based on a platform of transparency and an expectation that they are empowered to make decisions. So that whole last section there was about how I take what I do well and help amplify the people I work with. So really you can kind of mash those things up, but it's really helpful to think about, how do I help people do a great job? And that's what the leadership brand does. That's the dimension it brings to that. They're really intertwined. And again, they both might adjust over time, but just be ready for that. Your leadership style might need to adjust with the people that you're working with as well, and what their needs are. And I think the last thing I might pull in here is that there's always time to reflect and to listen to others. Things might be working well and things might not be working well. And so you can always take the time to reevaluate your brand and whether it's effective, and just really understand whether people are perceiving your brand or not. Feedback is definitely a gift. And the quicker you're able to learn some of this stuff from people, the better it is to you being able to adjust and receiving results and outcomes from your organization that you want. So with that, Shalane, I think we are into the Q&A space. So I will hand it over. And I just want to take a moment and say thank you to all for joining as well. I hope that what we have here has some tangible nuggets or ideas that you can really take away and do something with. That's what Shalane and I were hoping you could take away and really work on a personal brand. And with that, Dewey, do I hand it back to you?
Yeah, very briefly, and it's really just to thank you so much for the great, great information. And scholars, fast and furiously, your questions are coming in. We're knocking at the door of about 30, so we're going to keep you for 9 hours more so we can address all of those with things. But no, we're going to cover off on as many of these as we can. And please remember, get connected with Shalane, get connected with Sarah after the show via their LinkedIn to be able to continue the conversation. And yes, we are setting the playback. We'll remind you again later on. We've had a couple of questions in those areas. So with all of that said, I've got to introduce Katrina Sun Breeze, wonderful partner of ours from APIA Scholars, our wonderful host. She's on the screen there now. So Katrina, no pressure, 30 questions and 19 minutes to cover all of them. So we'll hand the reins over to you, my friend. No heavy lifting there.
Thank you, Dewey. So as Dewey mentioned, my name is Katrina Breeze, and I work with one of Wells Fargo's many supportive organizations, an organization called APIA Scholars. We're the nation's largest nonprofit organization serving Asian and Pacific Islander American student success in college and also in early career. And so we have had an amazing partnership with Wells Fargo since the beginning of our organization. And just want to say thank you for having us here today. And it's our pleasure to really host this series with Wells Fargo throughout the year. I've really benefited from hearing all the great nuggets of wisdom from Sarah and Shalane, and always, Dewey throughout the year shares lots of wisdom and information for me, even as I think about my leadership brand and how, as he says often, we can be Missouri, just be the show me state and tell everyone around us a bit about our brand, whether that's our personal brand or your leadership brand. And so one question that I think is really timely that one of our attendees today asked was, how do you build a personal brand or a leadership brand in this virtual environment? We have so many tools at our disposal, and now even with Zoom and all sorts of technology, there's so many ways to do that. And so I don't know, I think that that's a question for everyone on this panel today. How do you do that in a virtual environment?
I'll go ahead. This is Sarah.
Please, Sarah.
I think, I think it's what we just talked about, right? Like part of it is deciding what your strengths are. So once you've kind of crystallized what you think your brand is, even in a digital environment, and the way I'm taking that is obviously we do the hygiene things with the resume and the profile pics and all of that. And I think Dewey is a great example. Actually, I'm just going to say it right now, right? Like, Dewey is living his brand right now in a digital environment by bringing colorfulness and casualness, but not casual, like bringing fun and energy to this moment. He could have been wearing a suit today, but he chose to wear what he was to live up to Black History Month, right? So I think it's a perfect example of how you can live your brand in a digital environment, even when we're having Zoom meetings. But I think the other really powerful thing, you guys, to remember when you want to live up to your brand, especially in a meeting format, is by asking a question and asking the kind of question that lives up to your brand, right? So have we thought about any innovative ideas in this space before? All of a sudden, you're an innovator. Have we defined what our next steps are? All of a sudden, you're a project manager. Like it really is as little as that, but it's so powerful. So once you've defined what your brand is or who you want to be, what you want to be known for is maybe another way to say that. Really think about, well, how do I demonstrate that in the smallest of terms in a meeting? And then try it, do it. You just have to do it once and then do it again and do it again. Shalane, would you offer anything else?
Yeah, that's great advice. I would just say in this virtual environment, a lot of people are interviewing virtually. As Sarah mentioned, you practice in front of your computer, looking at the camera, speaking clearly so that the person can hear you on the other end. Practice makes perfect. I can't say that enough. Whether you're interviewing in person or virtually, make the most of those opportunities to practice to kind of hone those skills out. That's the only thing I would add. No.
Great. Thank you, Shalane and Sarah. I also know Dewey always shares great tips on how to be better at LinkedIn posting. And so another reminder to all of our LinkedIn profiles are linked in this presentation, which we'll also be sending out after today's webinar. So definitely connect with us on LinkedIn. Another one of the questions that came in, which I think is really timely, February is Black History Month. And at API Scholars, we serve a wide diversity of first generation students, diverse students from across the country. And so this particular attendee asked, how do you approach the uncertainty of racism as a Black male aspiring leader?
Yeah, Katrina, thanks for that one. And thank you to the scholar that submitted that question. I think you have to focus on extending your brand in a way that is unapologetically you. And again, as a part of that today, I'm wearing something that some may say, well, why would you wear a dashiki on this? Well, it's Black History Month, and this is an opportunity to celebrate there. So I think it's about being very unapologetic about who you are and about your experiences. At the same time, please remember that your experiences are going to be different than others' experiences. It's about you sharing your experience, sharing your portion of the journey, and then learning maybe from what others have experienced, or sharing your experiences so that others can learn what it's like to be who you are. And again, I think for the scholar that submitted this question, such a bold question, and I'm happy to continue the conversation with this one offline. You've got my contact information, so let's continue with it. But I would just lead with, be a leader, be unapologetic about your life, the way that you live it, the things that you've accomplished, and let that serve as the biggest portion of your brand. And candidly, racism does exist. It's something that exists here on our planet. We have to be able to make sure that it's not emanating from us. I'll say it from that perspective. And that we also need to make sure that we're able to name it when we see those things occurring. And that's not always in a public session or a public segment where you go to someone directly. It may be after, hey, what you shared during the meeting was offensive to me, or could have been offensive to some of our female colleagues in the room, or did you know that when you shared that comment, it impacted these individuals in those different ways? And most of the times folks will say, wow, I didn't even know that happened. And so again, I think all of those become parts of leading, again, sharing a little bit of your journey and being willing to be vulnerable to share maybe with some others. But again, to the scholar that submitted that question, thank you so much for submitting it. Let's continue the conversation offline. If we need to, please contact me. So Katrina, thank you for that question. That's a very, very important subject. Very, very important.
Mhm.
Thank you, Dewey. I
You're
think
welcome.
to your point, just about authenticity, bringing your true self into your brand, I think makes it that much more powerful. And so I think that segues nicely to the next question that we have that came in. We've heard that adage, fake it till you make it, right? And so I think that sometimes when we think about powerful leaders, we don't always think necessarily of ourselves. Some of us certainly do, perhaps, but not everyone does. And so how do you balance that sort of powerful leadership brand and personal brand with authenticity when we really are sometimes given messages that we want to project something that may feel a little uncomfortable for us?
I can start off and take that one. So with the fake it till you make it, I would say everyone has to start somewhere. So know that every manager, leader, you're never born into that. You have to be given opportunity for that role. And so when you fake it till you make it, you want to take, transferable skills, experiences that speak to what you're going after. So if you don't have work experience, you haven't managed a team, but you've actually been involved either at school or in a volunteer event or group or club or organization, and you played a leadership role in that organization, speak to those skills. So whether it's, you led a major volunteer event, a food pantry drive, just all of those things show leadership. They demonstrate that you can execute on ideas, that you can bring people together and make things happen. So you want to speak to that. I'll tell you the truth, a good manager or leader will see the potential. And if you have the potential to do those things that the role is asking for, then they'll take a chance with you. They'll give you the opportunity. And like I said, just know you have to start somewhere. Never count yourself out. So the fake it till you make it is to make sure you have some transferable skills, experiences, knowledge to bring to that, to speak to the person the role that you're going after until you get that opportunity. And then I say, most importantly, when you get that opportunity, reach back and pull somebody that was just like you along for the ride. It's not always about what you can do as a person, but it's so much more about the legacy. We talked about Hank Aaron early on the beginnings, one of the beginning slides. Your legacy and what you do for other people is so critical and speaks to your brand, and you as a leader is giving back, not just for self-preservation, but looking back, bring somebody along with you.
Thank you, Shalane. That's all like really great advice, I think. And to also in follow up to that, one of the other great questions that we received, I think that as we move along in life and career, there will be stumbles along the way, and sometimes the faking it till you make it doesn't always work out, or there are life experiences that shape us. And I know I've even been given the advice of being transparent about failures or things that we do need to work on and develop. And so how would you or for the whole panel, how have failures affected your leadership brand, your leadership style and personal brand, and how can you really leverage those failures to just positively influence your brand moving forward?
I can start, but I'm sure we all have something to add in this. There is not a person walking this planet that hasn't made a mistake or an error of some kind. But the key is how you pivot. How do you learn from your mistake? That is critical. I'm in a manager role, and I always say to everyone I manage, we're all going to make mistakes. But how you recover from those mistakes is key, and that's what's critical. So you have to learn from it. You have to evaluate it. You have to be honest about it. And you have to make sure that you're taking the necessary steps so that you don't repeat that mistake. It has to be a learning experience. If you're just making mistake after mistake or the same mistake repetitively, what does that say about you, your personal brand, your work ethic? You don't want to be the person who continues to make the same mistake over and over again. You want to be the person that has learned from that experience and is pivoting to move forward. And so the best advice I could give is be honest, speak up. You don't want your mistake. If you know that you've made a mistake, you don't want somebody else to discover it. Bring it to your manager, your teammate, whoever, and say, hey, I was going over the data. I realized this, I made a mistake, but here's what I'm going to do to fix it. And make sure you've outlined those next steps. That would be my advice. But I know Sarah and Dewey, feel free.
Yeah, I think it's a great juxtaposition, right, of those two questions. And the way I see fake it until you make it is really a mantra. If that's an internal mantra to give yourself confidence if you're having self-doubt. That's how I see that one. That's the little thing, birdie over here on your shoulder saying, can I do this? Can I do this? And you say, fake it till you make it, because you're giving your confidence. And Shalane nailed that question, right? Whereas this idea of failures is a really interesting one. If we all just kind of open ourselves up to realizing that it's not failures, it's opportunities, what you start to realize is that when a mistake is made or there's a learning, sometimes it's not even a mistake is made. It's just we could have done it even better. It's really an accelerant to getting that much more experience and progressing that much more quickly. So I think, when somebody says there's a failure, it sounds so critical. And sometimes there's really, really important things that you need to be really, really in tune with. But for the most part, it's these small opportunities to just constantly be tweaking and improving. And it really, you guys, that is unlocking the gift. It's unlocking the power. And if you're paying any attention to the innovation space, they're saying fail as fast as you can, because the faster you fail, the faster you get to a smarter, better product, which can be the thing or yourself. So that's kind of how I see those two things working together and differently.
Katrina, the only thing I'll add to this, and I know we're going to take one more question, but the only thing that I'll add to this is that fake it till you make it can definitely be a thing. And also identify someone that you think has made it. And feel free to go and kind of knock on their door and get inside from them and say, hey, it looks like you made it. Did you really make it? And was it the first time or was it the 19th time? Rather, so be very okay with reaching out to folks, obviously our panelists and other industry leaders, to say, hey, listen, it looks like you made it. Did you really have to fake it? And if so, how did you do it? Okay, how did you get there? So I think those are just additional things that scholars can use, and folks are going to be willing to share. I promise you. And if they're not willing to share, that's okay. Move on and let's find someone that will.
I just wanted to add one more thing before we go to the next question. Ask for feedback.
Yeah.
You want honest feedback. Sometimes you won't know if you've made a mistake or if it's a failure, or if it could have been done differently if you don't ask. So be receptive to that feedback and take it as constructive criticism and then move forward.
So like Sarah said it earlier, feedback is a gift. Accept it as a gift. So.
Definitely. And sometimes it's hard to hear, but it helps us grow. And if it's not uncomfortable, right? And so I think that that's definitely really great advice. And the last question, and this is around just, all of the best practices and tips that are out there. Are there resources that you would recommend for people building their leadership brand and personal brand, whether it's books, inspirational speakers, videos, documentaries? What would you recommend for those wanting more?
Holy moly, there are so many options out there these days. And you could just go out and Google leadership brand or personal brand, and you'll get lots of stuff. But one thing that I really like, there's all these different assessment tests to learn about yourself. And I think those are really helpful to help narrow in. One I really like is Strength Finders. Shalane and others, you might have one you like, but I really like that one. You go and you buy the book, and if you buy the book, then you can take the test. And then what it does is it narrows in on your top 5 strengths. And those strengths probably are going to stay with you for the majority of your life. Maybe it switches out if you have some major experience in one way or another. But when you're on that search of discovery internally, and you're trying to figure out what you think you're good at, it is helpful, I think, to take one of those. There's many out there. There's discover your strengths. There's all kinds, but I think one of those is helpful.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Strength Finders, and I've literally brought it up here on my little device. And so strategic, empathy, positivity, belief, and connectedness. Does that sound like me? That's again, I think any assessments like that are really, really helpful to measure. And again, I think you can have some tweaks and adjustments in there over time as you transition into different roles. But I think those are great, great resources. And to Sarah's point, tons of books out there that you can pick up on around kind of strengthening your brand, effective leadership. I think any of those topics will yield a really good search for you. Shalane, close us out here with this one. What else do folks need to be thinking about relative to resources?
It's been a pleasure, and I would just say Google's your friend. There's TED Talks, there's books, there's articles, there's everything you can read. I would also say, we mentioned some, celebrities or famous figures. You might want to read their autobiography. They'll tell you about some of their failures along the way, some of their learnings along the way. It's everywhere. Speak to people, friends, family. Everybody has their own experiences and path that they walk in this life, and we all have something to learn and from each other. And so, share, learn, absorb all the information. There's a lot of resources out there.
I'm gonna
reach out on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to, continue the conversation.
I'm gonna mention one more. Simon Sinek is really excellent with this idea of leadership, and he has a couple TED Talks. I would highly recommend those. And then, of course, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name, Brene Brown, from a vulnerability standpoint, a whole new approach to how you can be authentic and vulnerable. And actually, that's where your power is. So I think those two, if you are not familiar with those two folks, you should get familiar with them from a leadership perspective more than the personal brand perspective.
Right.
Great. Well, I think that sort of wraps up our Q&A, Dewey.
So Katrina, thank you so much for your masterful facilitation on that. Let's give her a virtual round of applause, man. She's good like that, keeping things moving in those kinds of areas. Sarah, Shalane, I'm going to ask you all for a brief closing thought, encapsulated in 15 seconds or less on this last slide, just to get a final closing thought from you all, and then we're going to transition into our closing items here for today. So we'll go in alphabetical order. So Shalane, we'll let you go first with your closing thought. I could have done it another way, Sarah, but I didn't do that. So I'm not even going to comment on other ways I could have done it. I'm going to say who's closest to Charlotte. How about that? Shalane is closest to Charlotte. So we start with give them that closing thing that they can hold on to, Shalane.
My closing thoughts would be, start the journey now. Sarah gave you some really great tips on the discovery phase, defining, and then putting that into action. So start today. Write down 10 to 15 words. How do you see yourself now? And then ask for that feedback from your friends, family, your colleagues, your classmates, and take that information and try to really figure out, what do you want to show to the world? What do you want to be? How do you want to show up? What do you want your leadership brand to be? And put it into action. start now.
That's Shalane Colbert, y'all. Make sure you stay connected with her. Reach out to her on LinkedIn. She and Sarah are having a race to see who can get the most LinkedIn requests before the end of the broadcast today. So I have to tell who's winning. All right, Sarah, we see you've got your wonderful snow background there. So, bring us home here. Bring us home. Closing thought.
Keep it warm, right? Keep it warm. All over the country.
Yes.
I think what I was going to say is the work is worth it. The work is worth it.
Wow.
If you just take even the half hour or more, I can't tell you how much easier it makes that interview, how much easier it makes that conversation, because you know what? You've really discovered yourself, right? And it just makes it so much easier for you to talk about yourself when you've done the work. And even the littlest amount of work, it pays off. So, it's the night before an interview and you haven't done your personal brand, that's fine. Spend the half hour doing what Shalane just said, just write down some words. It will help. Very
good. That's Sarah Ostendorf, team from Alaska, I think is where she's joining us from today, based on her
it's probably warmer in Alaska than
it may actually be. And, to make this transition from the lighter side to the more serious things here, certainly want to recognize lots of our folks in the West and in Texas and other markets that are being impacted and have been impacted by the storms there. So please, scholars, stay safe, and encourage you to check in on others that may be impacted in some way, shape, or form. So we want to be very, very candid in sharing that. Please just continue to stay safe out there with things. All right, as we close out here, just a couple of reminders relative to our upcoming programming and upcoming events. The next slide will give you a breakout of our upcoming webinars. We've got 2 done now. We've still got 10 more to go. March is a 1-2 punch. We've got great partners from our human resources team that will be on talking about the importance of that rock solid resume and also interviewing skills. And it's interesting, our playbacks, the thing that we've seen the most playbacks on from last year's series has been around job interviews. So please join these sessions, submit questions in advance, scholars. Again, this helps us to shape and tweak and make adjustments with what we're presenting, but join us for that 1-2 punch there for the month of March. When we get to April, my buddy Bonnie Wallace will be back in the saddle with us, focusing on Teach Children to Save Month and money management and budgeting. And then we'll also spend a little bit of time in May on the topic of entrepreneurship and the hashtag gig economy. So they had to teach me what the gig economy was, but I know all about it now. Then when we get into June on the next slide, you'll see some of the additional sessions that we have coming up here. For June, we've got a great discussion that's going to be happening around the topic of salary versus value. So comparing those job offers maybe that you're considering, is it best to work in this market, or is it best to work in this market? Do I have to have a car here? Can I use public transportation? Do I have to pay for parking? I mean, all kinds of things that you can factor in relative to evaluating job offers. And then July 29th, team, go ahead and circle this one in pink highlighter. You've got to join us for our career discussions around internships. Whether you're a second semester freshman or whether you're a graduating senior, come and join us. We had over 2,100 registrants last year. I'd love to see us have 3,000 folks registering for that webinar for us in July. Then in August, we'll touch on social media smarts, spend a little bit of time in September with our great student partners to talk about the student debt and strategies there to address things in those areas. And then once we get to the fall, when you all are back on campus again, we'll be talking about building credit during Get Smart About Credit month of October. And then we'll wind up the year with a great topic around mentors and sponsors. So some important things that we'll loop in there. So quick reminders for you, be on the lookout for be watching your inbox for the playback details. Give us, I'm gonna say 72 hours, maybe a little bit longer than that, but you'll get an email from us with the playback. Go ahead and engage with that content. Use that hashtag WFC Beyond College to reshare the YouTube link, or post it, or pass it along to some of your colleagues or classmates to share the information with them. I think those pieces become really, really important. The next slide is another huge one for us. And you'll also get this in the email. Give us your feedback. Great partner with us on, Barbara Scotland, who puts together the framework for all of these events and is behind the scenes, but is also helping us to gather some of the data. The surveys are critically important, scholars. Give us feedback so we can make adjustments, so we can continue to refine the things that we're doing. So take a couple of minutes, give us that feedback, and just kind of help us to pay it forward and build a better mousetrap, as we like to say. And last but not least, just a quick reminder again to join us on March the 4th for creating a rock solid resume. This is going to be another dynamic session. please go ahead and get registered now, share the information with others that may want to join. And again, send us questions because that's going to help us to frame the conversation that we'll be hosting for that day. With that said, I want to encourage everyone to just continue to stay safe. We touched on it a little bit earlier. Do the things that you need to do to remain safe, whether you're joining classes in person, whether you're in a hybrid situation, or maybe you're taking classes some online and other days in class, or if you've had the entire semester or the entire school year from home, whatever you're doing, please continue to stay safe. Also want to shout out quickly our high schoolers. Saw great metrics around our high schoolers that joined today. So high schoolers, thank you all so much for joining, and please continue to share this information with anyone that you think could benefit from it. I'll close by thanking Katrina and thanking Dawn, who's behind the scenes, thanking Barbara Scotland, and of course, Shalane and Sarah for just the great information that they shared here for today. Have a wonderful rest of your February. If there's anything additional that we can do to help you, please don't hesitate to contact us. We look forward to seeing you back on March the 4th for our discussion around resume writing. Give a big round of applause to our great panelists and team. We look forward to seeing you next month. Till then, everybody, take care.